Okay, welcome back to the MSAHA Basketball Weekly Show. Last week we had a little bit of a tough time. Couldn't really bring you the full show, but we are hoping that we are good this week, and I think we are. So this week we will talk about a lot more wild things going on in this league, in the MSAHA Basketball League. People beating each other all over the place. We're going to talk about it this week. No guests today, unfortunately, but we're going to dive into some of these matchups coming up this next week as well. Should have a good show for you tonight. This is the MSAHA Basketball Weekly Show, and it begins right now. Welcome back. We appreciate you joining us right here on the MSAHA Basketball Weekly Show. I want to remind you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button to the TSJW Network YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button right now. This is the show, and we got a lot to talk about this week. So, last week we had Macomb taking on Meridian. These games happened in Hickory. So have girls and boys action. Now, these two teams had already taken each other on before, and those games were won, I do believe, by Macomb. This time, in girls, Macomb falling to Meridian again, 42-16. 42-16 ball game win for Meridian over Macomb. In boys, Meridian winning that one as well, 68-53. Now, this was a big one here. So this season, Meridian kind of been struggling. Going into the ball game, they had only won one conference game, had lost 6. And so this was a big game for them. And they were able to get a win at home by 15 points over Macomb. And the Gators, they've been doing a lot of winning. They still have a winning conference record now. And we'll talk about some more details on that front in just a little bit. But Macomb losing to Meridian 68-53, so the Flyers able to put that together. Now, Macomb has a big height advantage over Meridian, and Macomb won last time these two teams took each other on, but this time Meridian able to get the win and protect home court, winning 68-53. And then we had the following day on the Saturday, we had Tupelo and Meridian. So Meridian hosting once again. Now in this ball game, Meridian falling to Tupelo 64-59. So just after beating Macomb, they end up losing to Tupelo 64-59. Now I'm kind of in a little bit of a bad order here, as the day before Macomb took on Tupelo. So Tupelo came in on Friday, played Macomb, and then played the next day as well against Meridian and PCA. And so we'll talk about all those in a second as well. But Macomb beat Tupelo by 30 points, 80-51, so 29 points. That is a big margin of victory there for the Gators. So right after losing to Meridian by 15, they beat Tupelo by nearly 30 points. And then the following day, Tupelo beats Meridian 64-59. So just matchups, it's a big thing, and top to bottom, this conference is very interesting, and this is a good thing. This causes all this stuff to be very entertaining. Tupelo beating Meridian by 5 points on the road, 64-59, and that means the Titans have swept Meridian this year. They beat them both times they took each other on. Tupelo ends up taking on PCA in a game in which they lose 61-39 to the Paladins. Now, the Paladins have only lost one conference game, and that one was to the Muddy River Counselors. And so, not a tough loss, not that bad of a loss for Tupelo. You kind of expect it, but losing by 20, PCA was able to handle business, but they had just beaten Meridian, lost to Macomb by nearly 30 points. So, very interesting there. Then we had a big girls game. So this was a huge game here, PCA and Meridian. Now these two teams started their season off against each other in Lacombe. PCA won that ball game 32-29. Now going into this ball game, PCA had not lost a conference game yet. Meridian has been battling. They lost to PCA and to Laurel, and PCA had beaten Laurel. So PCA was undefeated in conference, Laurel with 1 loss, Meridian with 2 to Laurel and to PCA. Well, this one, Meridian able to get back at PCA, so they split their season series in the regular season. Meridian wins 34-29 over the Paladins. So in Lacombe, PCA wins, and Hickory, Meridian wins. And so Meridian Lady Flyers now 34-29 win, and that allows them to be 5-2 in conference now. Their 2 losses being to Laurel and PCA, but they got a win over PCA as well. So big win there for Meridian. In boys, PCA winning, but it was 48-28. So a 20-point win for PCA, but very low-scoring game, an extremely low-scoring game. Paladins able to come away with the 20-point win on the road. So PCA comes out of this week 6-1 in conference play. And then this was just last night, Laurel taking on the Muddy River Counselors. Now we had girls and boys there. Now, interesting fact here, Laurel has been playing games. The Counselors have been off for a while. So the Counselors, in boys, Counselors have not played since November 22nd when they played Tupelo. And in girls, they had not played since November 19th when they played Laurel. And so when the Counselors played Laurel last time, Laurel won 61-42. But the game was tied in the third quarter. This time, a very different story. Laurel laid down the hammer on the Muddy River Counselors in the girls' game, 68-15, over 50-point win. I mean, the Lady Nighthawks really just took it to the Counselors. And the worst losses of the season for the Counselors. Counselors are going to have to regroup now. They're looking at a 2-4 conference record. And so you're wanting to get back on the horse. Next game for them will be against PCA, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And as we look a little bit now, checking out a little bit of in the boys game. Okay, so to the boys game, this was an interesting one as well. So Laurel and the Muddy River Counselors. Now the last time these two teams played, the Counselors had gone out to a 30-point lead in the ball game, and then Laurel was able to storm back and cut the lead to 13, and that's where it ended. A win for the Counselors by 13 points, 66-53. This time, Laurel comes out pretty nicely. Counselors missing shots early, but Laurel taking advantage of it. Laurel took his lead by as much as 11. They led 25-14 at one point in the second quarter. Counselors were able to storm back, take the lead right at half, 32-30. And then the second half belonged to the Counselors. Counselors end up winning 74-54 at home, but Laurel threatening them. The Counselors hadn't played in a little while. Laurel was looking very good. Brock Anderson finishing with 23. Landon Hollingsworth finishing with 19. Those two guys scoring the basketball. They were able to be effective there against the Counselors. But the Counselors still able to pull out the win. They win by 20 points, 74-54. So the Counselors remain undefeated in conference as well as undefeated overall. The Counselors are 11-0 overall. Matter of fact, going into the ball game the day before, according to Max Preps in the state of Mississippi, the Counselors are ranked number 15 in the whole state in terms of basketball, which was something that was like, wow, that is quite the accomplishment with a 10-0 record at the time. But then Laurel threatening to go ahead and crash it all down and get the win there. But the Counselors able to pull it out and get the win by 20 points, 74-54. Also last night, the Jackson Victors and the Meridian Flyers faced off. A 69-49 win for the Victors. So the Victors win by 20. And see, the Victors bring a monkey wrench into this conference. The Victors last year, Jackson and Meridian were on the bottom of the conference last year, kind of losing everybody but when they were playing against each other. And, as far as this is concerned, Jackson is the third team in the conference, and they're solidly there. They're 5-2. and they're third in the conference right now. They're going to play the Counselors tomorrow for the first time. They have not played the Counselors yet, but they beat Meridian by 20 points, 69-49. Very solid win on the road for the Jackson Victors. And so that'll wrap up all the games that we have from the last week. Now, I do want to remind you that we do 18U. We cover 18U girls and 18U boys, and so that's where we are in terms of coverage of the conference. So a few things that were noteworthy from the last week. So Laurel Lady Nighthawks are rolling, folks. I mean, they beat the Counselors by over 50 points, but I'll tell you this. Even more than just that. I think they've won their last 7 games. They went up to Arkansas for the Tri-State Classic, came back 4-0 in that. And a lot of times when you come away from that undefeated, that's a good sign for your team. And that is something that I think Laurel has to be very happy with. And then to go play a team that you kind of were in a neck-and-neck battle with the first time at home, and then to beat them by over 50 points has got to feel good for Laurel. Laurel Lady Nighthawks looking pretty good. They're still in that second spot in the conference. Well, actually, they're tied with PCA right now, but the head-to-head goes to PCA as PCA beat Laurel the first time. Now, that one came down. That was 34-33 game, a game that literally came down to the last 10 seconds. So, again, we've got 2 divisions here in 18U that are very interesting. Now, the Counselors firmly on top of the 18U boys division. I mean, they're undefeated, winning their games by an average of 31 points. But PCA's right there, number 2, 6-1 conference record with an average win margin of 19. And so one thing we weren't able to talk about last week that I did want to touch on is the Hattiesburg Forerunners and the PCA Paladins. They took each other on a week and a half ago or so. Hattiesburg led throughout the game. PCA came back and beat them. So that's interesting too, because what it seems like is that the Counselors PCA are up at that 1 and 2 pretty solidly. I think that's going to be the case. It's looking like that right now. But PCA is going to have to take care of business. The Counselors are going to have to take care of business. Now, the Counselors have already won 9 games. So they've already won 9 conference games, which puts them in a pretty good position to have a great seeding in the end. But PCA sitting at 6-1, they got to take care of business, and almost lost to Hattiesburg at home, but also beaten Meridian by 20, but low scoring affair there. But we'll talk about them a little bit later on as well because we got some upcoming games. So that wraps up this last week. Again, want to remind you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button to the TSJW Network YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button right now. We try to do this show every Wednesday at 9 p.m. Today, I mean, we were a good few minutes late, unfortunately, but we're able to be here with you. We appreciate you joining us. So going into next week's games, okay? And so we do have, this will be tomorrow night, live from Byram. Laura Willing will be streaming this ball game. The Muddy River Counselors will take on the Jackson Victors. Now, this is this is always a big game. The Counselors have multiple players on their team. They used to play for the Victors. It's dwindling over time as the Counselors have been around for a longer and longer, 5th season of the existence for the organization. I mean, the Coach Willis, used to coach for the Jackson Victors. So Michael Williams, of course, used to play, as well as Mark Johnson used to play. Ethan Viverka used to play for the Victors as well. So this is a nice, it's kind of a homecoming type of game for those guys. But the Victors this year, they're not trying to have this be a walk in the park at all. The last few years, Counselors have been able to win by big margins. This year, the Victors have been bringing it on. They're 5-2 in conference, and they're going to be ready to go. One game, we don't usually talk about younger games, but do want to kind of mention this. In 14E boys, Victors and Counselors will be something else. Both teams are 7-0. And, when it comes to 14U, it's hard. And I haven't seen the Victors play yet. We talked to Coach Cornelius on the show a few weeks ago. But, it's hard to be able to see what's going on with 14U. Counselors are the 3-time defending champions. They're looking for a 4th in a row. Haven't lost a 14U game since February 20th of 2021. That's a long time ago. That's nearly 4 years ago that the Counselors lost their last 14U basketball game. And so Victor's going to try to end that streak tomorrow night. That should be live on Counselors TV. Bring it bringing it to you right here on the TSJW Network YouTube channel. But talking about 18U, Victor's going to try to, they have been able to bring their guys back, bring some of their guys back healthy. Ray Ware was hurt at the end of last year. He's healthy now. Of what I hear, I think they're all healthy. Haven't seen them yet, so I'm definitely interested to see how they're playing. But they're at their new home gym there at First Baptist in Byron, Mississippi, so the Counselors Victors should be interested in there. Counselors would have the edge there in terms of a prediction just because, undefeated on the season. But, Laurel gave them a good shot, and the Victors had beaten Laurel. But, again, these matchups, it's all about the matchups. And Laurel's a good team. They were playing well in that game last night as well. Also tomorrow, we have PCA and Hattiesburg. So, in girls, these two teams are going to take each other on. Hattiesburg kind of a little bit in a rebuilding year. They've got some players on their team that can play, but they are in a little bit of a rebuilding year. So I think PCA is going to be able to take this ball game. PCA just coming off of a loss to Meridian, of course, as we talked about just a second ago. But I think that I think PCA will be able to take this one over Hattiesburg on the road. Now they played in Lacombe just last week. Now they're going to play in Hattiesburg. So, and then as far as boys are concerned, PCA and Hattiesburg, we talked about that. Forerunners were leading the entire, for most of the game. PCA able to come back, get the win, 55-50. I think PCA will be live, and I think they'll be alert for this ball game, and I think PCA will be able to pull it off. The Paladins, they have a lot of experience on the court. They've got some real good play. So Tate Boggs, Scotty Covert, you're talking about good, experienced players. And, you got a lot of good players on that team. But those two in particular, very experienced players. And Tate Boggs, a senior. So you expect PCA to come out and do well here. But it will be a road game for them. And Hattiesburg, if they're shooting well, they got a few shooters. And if Hattiesburg's shooting well, it's a tough team to play. Just be straight up. Forerunners are a tough team to play if they are shooting well. Now, the Forerunners right now are 1-6 in the conference. They are the bottom team in the league. And the reason for that, is just because, some of the games they didn't shoot well, and then, it's been a tough league. They lost to Macomb twice. They lost to the Counselors once. They've lost to PCA once. They lost to the Victors once, and I do believe it's Meridian that they lost to as well. So, it's just been one of those, and all these teams are teams that you can lose to. These are teams that are competitive, so understood. But Hattiesburg going to be out looking for a win tomorrow. But they're going to be hosting PCA. It'll be a tough one there. Then the following day, which will be a Friday, December 13th, Hattiesburg's supposed to take on the Royal Hurricanes. I think this will be in Hickory, if I'm not mistaken. Correct. People can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. But Hattiesburg and the Royal Hurricanes will take each other on. Royal Hurricanes got their first win just a little bit ago. They beat Tupelo 58-56. And so they have a win. They're 1-4 in conference. And so they will take on Hattiesburg. Hattiesburg, we don't know what their record will be after the PCA game. Right now they're 1-6. Those are the two bottom teams in the conference at the moment. But we'll see what happens there. Royal Hurricanes and Hattiesburg. Then on the same day on Friday, Royal Hurricanes will take on Meridian again. And so see what happens there. The Hurricanes saw them one time when they played the Counselors. Counselors won that game 101-36. Hurricanes didn't look too good in that game, but I know that, you have ups and downs. They traveled, didn't have a lot of the guys that traveled with them, so I would expect them to do well. They beat Tupelo, so that's pretty impressive there. So Royal Hurricanes will take on Hattiesburg and Meridian on Friday. And then on Saturday, we got Tupelo and Laurel. These two teams already played one time. Up in Tupelo, Laurel won by 20. I would expect Laurel to kind of bring that back again. Laurel's got size, so they got a serious size advantage. Their size messed with the Counselors a little bit where they took a lead early. But then you got a guy in Landon Hollingsworth. Ethan Beach does a great job at point guard. Quick, good ball handler. Landon Hollingsworth's a great scorer. And he's a small guy, but he's able to play with some big guys too, and he can score the basketball. So I think Laurel will be able to take that one, taking on Tupelo. Also on Saturday, I would say the MSAHA game of the week, which it will be the PCA Paladins and the Muddy River Counselors. Before we get to the obvious game of the week, which is the boys' game, talk about the girls' game as well. So PCA and the Counselors. Obviously, the Counselors not in the greatest position of the season. They are 2-4 in conference with a 4-4 overall record. Overall as a season, this has been their best season yet, but they're coming off of a tough loss. 68-15, that's a big margin there against Laurel, so they're going to be looking to bounce back. They're going to be back at home, playing against PCA, tied for the number 1 seed, or really they're in the number 1 seed. They have the head-to-head over Laurel, of course, by 1 point, so you just can't. It's almost as if it's tied completely. So PCA and Counselor's going to take each other on. PCA with Cameron Covert, tall, good. They got some good guards as well. PCA is a good team. They'd have the edge over the Counselors, but the thing about the Counselors is that it depends on how they're playing. Didn't play well against Laurel. Laurel played really well, and they've been playing really well, but the Counselors didn't play well either. So you have both of those things happening there. Then let's talk about this boys game. So obviously this is the big game. PCA, Muddy River. The first time these two teams played, the Counselors won by 9 points on the road, 62-53 over PCA on the road. This was the 4th game of the season for the Counselors, I do remember. Now going into this game, PCA is 9-3, Counselors are 11-0. And this will be a matchup that should be pretty interesting. Counselors against PCA the last few years, or at least last year, Counselors done well against PCA at home. 2 years ago when PCA had the really good team that went 35-10, won the championship, the Counselors played PCA really close at home that time, 6-point spread there. Last year the Counselors won by over 20 points against PCA. Against the PCA team that they won and beat in the championship game by 1 point. So Counselors tend to do well at home against PCA, but we'll see what happens. PCA is trying to turn a corner here. They've been in a little bit of a lull, but you never trust that with PCA. They're going to come out doing well, so expect that. Expect a pretty good start from them actually in that ball game on Saturday. So that's PCA and the Counselors. So then the following Tuesday we get back to some conference action, Hattiesburg and Muddy River. As we talk about the girls, now we got a few games before them. Hattiesburg is going to play PCA. Counselor's going to play PCA. I guess they're both going to play the same team in one game as well. This will be at B Hall. Counselors will host it. These two teams already played. The Counselors won by 10, but they were up by as much as 20 in that game. The girls were. The Counselors right now, if we look at the standings, they're tied with the Forerunners, 2-4. Of course, Counselors have the head-to-head, both with the 2-4 conference record. Now, with the Counselors, all 4 losses are to the top 3 teams. So they lost once to Meridian, lost once to PCA, lost twice to Laurel. So that's the 4 losses for the Counselors. Hattiesburg has lost 4. 1 is to the Counselors, 1 is to Meridian, and 1 is to PCA. And so that gives them their 4 losses there. And Macomb on the bottom, 0-7. They just haven't been able to get a win. But Hattiesburg, Muddy River, we'll see. It depends on if the Counselors girls are able to turn the corner here. If they play similarly to how it was played against Laurel, it's going to be tough. I mean, Hattiesburg could totally beat them. Forerunners, as a matter of fact, took a lead against the Counselors early in the game last time. So definitely a winnable game for Hattiesburg. Should be interesting. Counselors would have the edge because they looked like the better ball club last time, but we'll see this time. As far as the boys are concerned, Hattiesburg, Muddy River, Counselors obviously have the edge. They're undefeated, looking pretty good. But, Laurel gave them a good shot. Hattiesburg, if they shoot well, they're a dangerous team. But Hattiesburg did give the Counselors a pretty good shot there in Hattiesburg. Counselors were able to withstand it and get the win last time. I'd expect something like that this time, but we'll see. I mean, it's basketball. Also on Tuesday, the Jackson Victors and the Macomb Gators. Should be very interesting. These two teams played. The Victors have lost 2 conference games. One of them's to PCA and the other one's to Macomb. So Macomb beat the Victors last time these two teams played. And this was when it was in Byram. This time it will be in Summit. And so, the Gators have height over the Victors. But I think it'll be a good game. I think it's going to be a close game. I have no idea what's going to happen in that game. That should be really interesting, actually, now that I think about it. Looking at that score, that'd be interesting. The Jackson Victors, Macomb Gators. What was crazy about these two teams is that last year they played twice. Both games came down to last possessions. And then this year these two teams play one time, very close game again. And so they'll play each other again here in Summit. So that should be interesting. So I'm telling you, the MSAHA, you got to keep up with it. It's all on the TSJW Network website, tsjwnetwork.net. Have the standings, have the scores, have the schedules for everybody. Go check that out to see what's going on. That's where you get all your information from, the TSJW Network website, tsjwnetwork.net. Please be sure to hit the subscribe button to the TSJW Network YouTube channel. This is the MSAHA Basketball Weekly Show. Appreciate you joining us. We out.